This wind is making your job a little harder.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. All right. We are on filmsgonewild.com. My name is John Wildman, the editor-in-chief of Films Gone Wild. And this, I think, may be my last interview for the day at the Naples International Film Festival. We're going to talk about a documentary titled Thaw. The director, Robin Hauser, who I believe, is the fifth or sixth film you've had at this fest?
It's number 5.
5 films that Robin has made and then had programmed at this film festival. So clearly, they are fans of your work. Our audience likely has not seen Thaw yet, so introduce us to Thaw.
Thaw is a feature documentary about the rising trend of elective egg freezing and the future of fertility.
I found it fascinating in so many different ways. Obviously, IVF has been in the news in a major, major way. There's a lot of things that go into the egg freezing and what have you. But you go, well, okay, well then we've had news, news docs about it. We've had a lot of things, but I'll wait for the security to get here.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. But you take a wonderful approach in giving us a handful of case studies that we follow along while you also fill in gaps. And there's also a wonderful use of animation throughout this. So there's a lot to talk about, and then I've got another topic I want to get to too. But I want to start off with the animation. Because you go, when you have a topic like this, it can become so academic, so freaking fast. Talk about the decision to incorporate animation into it, and then your approach to that animation.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, John, because it was a very conscious decision to bring in non-literal animation. We were looking for animators that could be super creative, super colorful. We wanted to make sure that we didn't have any stereotypical things. We told them, just because we're talking about fertility, it does not need to be pink. We're like, no pink, not even like, be careful about flowers, don't make any assumptions. As you know, I make films that are often about pressing societal issues that concern women, but I'm very thoughtful. I try to be very thoughtful about my male audience. And so how do you take something that's medical, scientific, and not make it so literal that people are uncomfortable or sort of squirming because you're talking about fertility, right? And so we found these fabulous animators in the UK. Mr. Griff is their name, and they were really able to do that. They knew nothing about fertility, which was perfect, and we worked with them to just make creative interpretations of what we were talking about, in a colorful, creative way, so that people could understand and digest it, but not sort of feel like it was a little bit too graphic.
I want to get into some more filmmaking aspects, but one thing I just had, because I was talking to Def Shapiro, who who just talked with a little bit ago, and we talked about one of the things that come out in the context of the film, and that is the degree to which women are now university educated numbers-wise compared to what men are, and the fact that it's a higher number, and it's the idea of like marrying up versus marrying down, and I have long been, I consider myself very much a feminist, and I've long been going, men just suck, Jesus Christ, and I have those things, and it was fun. It was interesting watching the film to go, this is such a real application that also lends an interesting context into the rise of incel culture and MAGA and things like that, because you go, you don't need us, in so many ways you don't need us, and now science is going, and now you really don't need us, but that could have been a whole nother film. And yet here it's weaved into the structure of the difficulty that in going through, you know, the freezing process and going through that, and the decision and the timing and all of that. Talk about the inclusion of that. How much was there? A lot of it. Could you had more, or did it just kind of seep in? How did that get in there?
Yeah, you know, it's. I love hearing your male perspective on this, because it is really complicated, and there's a lot to unpack, right? I think what is fair to assume is that most heterosexual women, maybe most women regardless, whether they're in same sex or heterosexual, would prefer to have a partner in raising children. So I think most women, let's just go with a heterosexual relationship, most women want to find Mr. Right to be the father of their children. It seems that more and more men are comfortable with waiting and then, maybe assuming that they'll get married sometime in their 40s. They don't have that biological clock. They don't have to really be as concerned about it. Their biggest concern is, are they going to have to marry somebody so much younger that may or may not be interesting to them, may not be, intellectually compatible or whatever. But the idea is that you were talking about a little bit about hypergamy, hypogamy. And traditionally in Western society, probably in most societies, women have historically married up, and that's called hypergamy. So women, it's completely acceptable and almost sort of standard for a woman to marry somebody who may be, a man that makes more money, that has a higher maybe position in the workplace,
right.
et cetera.
He's ascending. Yes,
he's ascending, and she might be too, but nobody's going to blink an eye if a female flight attendant,
right,
marries a CEO, or even if a woman who didn't finish college marries a man in a corporate job. But reverse that, and you see that that's a little bit more shocking. People might be sort of whispering on the side, right, about a woman who is the CEO of IBM and her bartender boyfriend or husband, right? I mean, that's just not as it's not. So, as you said, there are 27% more women in college right now in the United States.
That's the figure
than men,
I was referring to. Yes.
Right. There are also more women pursuing careers as lawyers and doctors. So, what does this do? It takes them out of those childbearing years, say between 25 and 35, because they're focused and working, and it's hard. It's hard to have a baby during those, if you're in med school, for example. And there's some really, you mentioned MAGA, I mean, look, there's some really extreme beliefs out there. Right now, the only gender that can actually bear a child and carry a child to term is a woman. Now, in the future, that might change, but that's the way it is right now, right? And so there is a belief by some people that women, that's what we were brought on earth to do, and that's probably what we should be doing, and is it right to have women in the corporate world? That's obviously an extreme that I don't believe in, but it is an extreme, and we are getting to a place that because women are waiting longer to have children, less children are being born. There are more fertility issues, right? What was interesting about the hypergamy, hypogamy, and this idea of the mating gap is that a lot of people say, oh, well, let's blame the fact that women aren't having babies until late on the fact that they're in school, on the fact that they're pursuing careers. And in the study that Marcia Inhorn at Yale did, she quickly discovered by interviewing 150 women that no, the vast majority of these women weren't having children because they hadn't found the right partner.
Right. And I've been on dating sites, and I understand why. Let's get back to filmmaking. As much as I could talk forever about that part of it, but let's talk about the fact that you do these case studies. So you're following one woman, and and her journey and her decision-making process to do this or not, and second guessing, and if she can afford it, and whether or not she has to move to go to a place in the islands to pull it off, and all this. And while these are all very self-possessed, very intelligent women, it's also so impactful and so emotionally fraught with peril that they're still having to have a lot of trust in you. And it's not the kind of trust where you just go in and have one interview, but no, you have to keep returning to them, over a course of a year, maybe more years, as this plays out. How easy, how difficult was that for you? And also, in that process, what were you doing to make it easy for them to be okay with you and your camera being next to them?
Well, I think the most important thing is to establish a basis of trust. The business side of what I do, I was careful to make sure I had releases from them right away before we even started filming, of course. I think more than any other film I've made, I was aware that it's possible that in the course of making this film, one of our main subjects or any of our subjects might get cold feet and want to pull out. And, in fact, there were a time or two that we had to sort of talk some people off, just reestablish our contact with them and letting them know that we do have their interest in mind and their best interest in mind, and that we are very careful about how we present them on screen. Because they become like daughters to me, right? Or friends in a lot of cases. So they are sharing deeply personal stories. To make it good, they have to be very vulnerable, which they are, as you see. I also think that the way that we used selfies in this film gave us an opportunity for them to feel a little bit safer. And I don't think these subjects, because they're not actors, could conceptualize as well of how that was going to look on the big screen. And so for us, if there was any awkwardness at all about talking to your phone, I said to them, look, hold it horizontally. We set it all up so that it was high res. And we just said, talk to it like it's your best friend. And when we're not around, and when you're there alone on the beach in Barbados, or if you're in your, bathroom about to shoot yourself up with more hormones, turn your camera on and just talk to it like a friend. And it really worked. It really worked.
Yeah, no, it did. The final question I have for you is that toward the very, very end of the film, we have a little bit of a call to action aspect about it. And it hadn't really raised its head, throughout the and I was like going, oh damn, it's like Robin's making this a call to action now, but I was going, was that just kind of a thing that happened organically, or because I know I've had a few of your films in my fest, I've watched them, and I go, Robin's not above this. She'll go call to action on your ass, right? And so I was wondering if that was the case.
Well, and we really debated whether or not to put that in. So you're talking about Caroline Gleich, and Caroline is a public figure. She actually ran for senator of Utah. She didn't win, but she got a third of the votes, and she's got zero experience in terms of politics and stuff. You do know me, and you know that I care a lot about, freedom of choice, women making decisions for themselves. And when Caroline talks about reproductive rights, reproductive freedom, it was at a fraught moment, right, when we were filming that. And the Alabama Supreme Court decision to name embryos as, the personhood of embryos, and that was shutting down so women couldn't, there was just so much of that. At the same time, you don't want to put so much politics in your film that you're going to date it.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure we weren't dating the film. But Caroline is so earnest about that, and that is really true, and that's the truth to her. So my decision and the editor's decision, all of ours with producer Annie Marr, was not so much, of course I'm interviewing her, and that's part of the interview, but the decision is, do we keep it in or not? And I think that my male audience is going to react to that differently than women, because women feel most women really align with Caroline on that, and they feel the same way. And I think this whole idea of, can women really have it all? Like, lean in, and how do you, and, Sheryl Sandberg's book was a great success. That this idea of, leaning in and everything. I mean, why can't why can't we just be who we are? And that theme carries over to one of the last lines in the film, is when Kathleen says, I'm always being told, don't be too much, don't want too much, don't do too much. And that line, and then she said, I don't want to always have to be who you want me to be. That touched me personally. I mean, I really understood that, and I really felt like, damn right. I mean, why does that happen to women more than men? It just does.
Well, no, it's infuriating, and like I said, I'm as someone who gets into Facebook debates, thankfully not nearly as much as I used to, and what have you, and is very happy to put my voice out there in support, and also being very careful not to lead when it's not my place to lead, but to be just a supporting voice. That is one of those things that just drives me up the fucking wall, and and one of the things that, like I said, that made the film resonate beyond just the academic aspect of, this is what's going on right now, and this is the process that that women have to go through, and then you go, well, in the context of, because this is the real world and how it affects it, and all of that, and that's why, like I said, the aspect of the idea of how much needed is in, because yes, you're absolutely right. Whether it be men or women, yes, we would all love to have a partner, or, as I think, paraphrasing Susan Sarandon, a witness to our lives, with us. And the question is, well, what do I have to settle for in order to get that? And do I need to settle for any? Is it so important to me to have that person walking that path with me, to settle for someone who I would never even entertain having a conversation with?
And I don't think settling is anything that any of us ever want to do. At the same time, I think being realistic about everybody's limitations. We all have them. Nobody's perfect. But I would say to you, John, no, don't settle. Absolutely don't settle. Don't. And because how are you going to be authentic? How are you going to be your authentic self if you realize, that you are kind of settling? And I think that will always bother you, and ultimately that person's going to know it.
I'm going to go right to my Hinge feed right now and put that on there. Again, the film is Thaw, documentary screening at Naples International Film Festival. Been talking with Robin Hauser, who I was teasing you on the red carpet that I believe you have one more stamp on your Naples Film Festival card, and you'll get a free Subway sandwich.
Yeah, perfect. That's
so,
great.
Congratulations again.
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate it.